Hungarian lawmakers are going to be passing laws barring LGBT content for minors. So, everybody knows that Hungary is the country that was very not accepting of migrants and refugees. They're a country that's led by Viktor Orban. They're a country that's also slowly sliding away from democracy. Viktor Orban is consolidating more and more power as it slides from democratic principles, right? And of course, Viktor Orban is extremely far right. I actually, when I was doing Model UN, I was the president of my Model UN club and the founder. I, actually had to be Hungary at the United Nations on the issue of refugees. And I gotta say, I never felt more disgusting than when I was up there using like gay rights cynically. And like, for example, I had to go up there and say when I was representing Hungary, like, you want me to accept these refugees when I know you you liberals care deeply about the homosexual. They don't like the homosexual. And I was using it so cynically from the position. Or I remember at one point someone was like, well, Mr. Dylan Burns, the ambassador from Hungary, a terror attack is less likely to happen than a lightning strike. And then I responded, are you trying to compare those maimed and bloodied? Are you trying to reduce the significance of that by comparing it to a mere lightning strike? I don't think those who lost lives on 9/11 would like being compared to a lightning strike, like it was just a oopsie doopsie. It wasn't a will of nature. It's just the way I used language. And and a thing I did a lot was I took crime data, but what I would do, I would cut off like the end date and the start date, and would use only like a few years in the late 2000s, like from 2015 to 16 or 14 to 16, and I would use data that had recent reclassifications of crime. And what I would do is I would have that reclassified data, so it would like mess with the numbers a little bit, and then show that and say, see, these are the crime statistics that happen when you let in refugees. And it was a really gross but really unique experience. I'm happy I did it because I got to see like how to cynically like use data, cynically use talking points, and like from like a different perspective I've never seen before. But it was super I don't know, it was super enlightening, to say the least. And eventually the legislation that we got passed in the UN was, if you want refugees, you can take them. So I mean, it was like, okay, I'm fine with this legislation, then I don't need to take refugees. And everybody clapped and they were so happy because they think they got something done. But like, okay, like nobody's gonna take like maybe like half the countries will take refugees. It's not gonna be enough. Good job. Kicking the can down the road, but that was my job. I had to kick the can down the road. Anyway, let's actually read this article. Lawmakers in Hungary passed legislation Tuesday that prohibits sharing with minors any content that portrays being gay or transgender. Something supporters said would help fight pedophilia, but which human rights groups denounce as anti-LGBT discrimination. Okay. So, the first thing is, debate. Infrared, stop talking behind his back. What, does he support like banning like the gays or something? We're talking about this right now, not Infrared. So, I mean, does he support banning gays or something? That wouldn't be a huge surprise to me. Anyway, back to this. So, first thing, it's not going to combat pedophilia. Presenting homosexuality in a responsible manner to minors is not going to stop anybody from being a pedophile. And it's not going to stop children from being preyed upon. Pedophiles existed before TV. They've existed during TV. They will exist going into the future. Okay? And let's be clear. I think I have a resource on this. 1 second. Pedophilia is actually a separate sexual, quote-unquote, orientation. It's a terrible, disgusting one, but it is. To say somebody is a homosexual pedophile, or homosexuals are pedophiles, is completely inaccurate. Homosexuality is the attraction to men. Men, males, people of your age group, the same way heterosexuality is. And when you talk about pedophilia, that is people who are sexually attracted to minors due to they're trying to prey on innocence. They prefer minor attracted, but I don't care. They are trying to prey upon innocence, which is completely different than what I, a homo, is sexually attracted to, which is men. They are not gay in the same way that anyone who would molest a girl, a man assumingly, is not straight. They are pedophiles. Also, if we were to live under this classification, though, let's be clear, we would live under the reality, acknowledging that the vast majority of pedophiles do prey upon young girls. And if you were to classify it as homosexual, the statistic would still be like 11 or 12 to 1. One second. I actually have a paper on this from SciHub. Cross-generational sexual behavior, then, may constitute a fixation on the part of the offender, a sexual orientation towards children as the result of arrested social sexual development, or it may constitute a regression, the result of a sudden or progressive deterioration of emotionally meaningful or gratifying adult relationships. In general, fixated child molesters are drawn to children sexually in that they identify with the child and appear in some ways to want to remain children themselves. It is for this reason that the trend for fixated offenders is to target boys as victims. This does not represent a homosexual object choice psychologically, but a narcissistic one. They see the boy as a projected representation of themselves. They feel themselves to be more child than adult, more boys than men, and therefore find themselves more comfortable, especially sexually, in the company of children, boys and girls, than adult men and women. Do you see how classifying that as its own thing is really important there? Because the reason for sexual attraction isn't, I am sexually attracted to men. It is specifically, they are sexually attracted to children because they are projecting themselves onto said child. So to think that banning representation of homosexuality in media is at all going to impact the amount of pedophiles in the world is wrong. That's just wrong. That's not going to do anything to protect children. In fact, it will hurt children. I actually do have data showing very clearly. One second. Let's see. Do I have it here? Nope. Right here. It's from Growing Up LGBT. It's from Just Like Us, who released a new independent research report into bullying in schools. What this shows is that LGBTQ plus youth, I'll just summarize the report because it's, a pretty large report, that LGBTQ plus people in school face a lot of bullying, they face a lot of discrimination, and they face like higher rates of depression and suicide ideation because of their discrimination in schools. But those schools which have LGBTQ plus inclusive programs, the mental health of LGBTQ youth, big surprise, is greatly improved. But this is the real kicker. This is the thing that I almost find it hard to believe, but is amazing news. Those programs did not only help LGBTQ plus youth have better mental health, they also helped straight heterosexual youth have better mental health. And I think somebody who was involved in the report summarized it quite well. A report shows for the first time that young people who attend schools who take part in LGBTQ plus inclusive work are likely to have better mental health outcomes than those who attend schools that don't, whether they are LGBTQ plus or not. We expected outcomes for LGBT plus young people to be better, but thrilled to see the impact of creating an inclusive environment has on all young people. Now, this doesn't have to do specifically with children's media, but it does have to do with creating an environment in children's schools that are inclusive. And it isn't hard to believe that communicating these messages similarly in media as done in schools would have a similar impact on young people developing. And children's education is most probably important to start young. It's always important to start young. That's why you get young people reading young, as in You want to get them reading young. You want to build them an interest in reading. And so when it comes to ideas of inclusion, as in, gay people exist, they're perfectly fine, they're perfectly healthy, and you should treat them like with respect, and you do it in a responsible manner. That is the most responsible thing you can do to protect those youth. It helps get the message of, love thy neighbor out very early. And it's most likely going to be taken to heart the most at that age. Okay, let's get back to the article. The conservative ruling party of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban introduced the legislation, which is a later effort to curtail the rights of gay men, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people in the Central European nation. Also, it is no coincidence that this is being done during Pride Month. They are doing this to intimidate gay people. Hungary's National Assembly passed the bill on a vote of 157 to 1. Overwhelmingly. I couldn't imagine how it must feel to be a Hungarian homosexual or a Hungarian LGBT person right now. The ruling Fidesz party has a parliamentary majority, and lawmakers from the right-wing Jobbik party also endorsed the measure. One independent lawmaker voted against it. All other opposition parties boycotted the voting session in protest. That makes sense. Human rights groups have denounced the measure strongly, seeing it as a tool that could be used to stigmatize and harass residents because of their sexual orientations and gender identities. Some human rights officials have compared it to the so-called gay propaganda law passed in Russia in 2013, which human rights official says has become a tool to harass sexual minorities. On the same full day, the opposition's place is not in the parliament, but on the streets. Budapest Mayor Kerensky wrote on Facebook. Lawmaker Gorgly Oredo of the Democratic Coalition parliamentary grouping said the changes violate the standards of parliamentary democracy, rule of law, and human rights. The legislation presented last week will face its primarily aimed at fighting pedophilia. Again, we've already talked about how it won't do that. It include amendments that ban the representation of any sexual orientation besides heterosexual, as well as gender change information in school sex education programs. Wait, so if it's to combat pedophilia, then there should be no representation of marriage. Teachers should have to take off their marriage rings when entering schools. There should be no hugging, nothing of that sort. Nothing heterosexual as well. Why would they leave that out? Again, this is not to fight pedophilia. It's not going to have any impact on pedophilia whatsoever. The effect and point of this legislation is to intimidate gay youth and push them to blow their brains out. Push them as the enemy of the right, as something to fight against, to demonize, a boogeyman to motivate right-wingers to come out and support Viktor Orban. Simple as. Thousands of LGBT activists and others had a protest in Budapest on Monday in an unsuccessful effort to stop the legislation from passing. The Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe, the continent's leading human rights body, has also asked Hungarian lawmakers to reject the legislation, stating reinforced prejudice against LGBT people. The party also successfully championed a law making it possible for trans people to legally change the gender markers on their identity documents. Human rights officials say that puts them at risk of humiliation when they need to present identity documents. Quite disgusting, but sadly unsurprising from a far-right Hungarian government. Very sad.